No one ever said making movies was cheap, but it really doesn't need to be this expensive either.
World War Z didn't just trim an expensive scene or two. This movie's entire third act was gutted and replaced in post-production. In the theatrical ending, the movie concluded with Brad Pitt's Jerry Lane wandering around a research laboratory and discovering the scientific solution to all the world's zombie problems. But in the original shoot, things were supposed to be a lot grimmer for our hero. Before the revisions, Jerry and his sidekick Segan would have made it to Russia to do a blockbuster-sized battle with zombies, and discover a method of undead defeat the old-fashioned way. But there was still trouble on the home front, as his wife and children were in North America, and she'd turned to prostitution to provide for her family, and ultimately shacked up with her former colleague, played by Matthew Fox. This would have culminated in Pitt's character questing across Siberia to make way to his now estranged wife, leaving room for what would have been a full-on trilogy of World War Z films. But the studio wanted a happier ending for the film and brought in a bunch of new creatives to rewrite and reshoot the third act, and everything else, including almost all of Fox's parts, were left on the cutting room floor, never to see the light of day. Not only did Paramount lose the money they'd already spent for the clipped scenes, but the reshoots ended up costing a whopping $25 million as well. And that, friends, is what you call a pricey pivot. With its crazy time travel plot, X-Men Days of Future Past is packed with familiar faces, but unfortunately, that means limited screen time for some of our favorite characters, including Anna Paquin's Rogue. The True Blood actress spent a week filming several elaborate scenes for the 2014 blockbuster, alongside fellow X-Men vets, but none of it wound up in the finished film. Director Bryan Singer told Entertainment Weekly, "Through the editing process, the sequence became extraneous. Like many things in the editing process, it was an embarrassment of riches, and it was just one of the things that had to go." After fan outcry, Singer and 20th Century Fox released a rogue cut of the film on DVD, restoring 17 minutes of previously cut footage that included Paquin sequences. If all had gone as director Frank Oz and screenwriter Howard Ashman had initially planned, this 1986 adaptation of the Broadway musical wouldn't have ended quite as happily. The pair intended to use the ending from the stage version of Little Shop of Horrors, with Audrey 2 eating Audrey and Seymour and terrorizing the world, but test audiences hated it.
Beep, beep. Does it have to be human? Beep, beep. Does it have to be mine?
Oz recalled to Entertainment Weekly, "For every musical number there was applause. They loved it. It was fantastic. Until we killed our two leads. And then the theater became a refrigerator, an icebox." In order to get the movie released, they needed better audience approval, so the elaborate 23-minute sequence, which cost a reported $5 million, was scrapped and a new ending was shot with the two leads alive and well. Though a black and white version of the original ending was included on a 1998 DVD release, full color footage was finally included in a director's cut edition Blu-ray in 2012. The Wicked Witch uses a lot of different tactics to try to stop Dorothy and her friends in The Wizard of Oz, but one never made it into the final version of the film. In the lost Jitterbug sequence, Dorothy, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion travel through the haunted woods only to be attacked by evil bugs that cause them to break out in song and dance. Also a popular dance style at the time, the Jitterbug was actually a remnant of an older version of the script that was tossed out. The whole number cost about $80,000 and took 5 weeks to shoot, but it was cut when producers decided the film was too long. Though the actual footage was destroyed, composer Harold Arlen captured a dress rehearsal of the number on video, later included as an extra on the DVD version of the film. Maybe the original footage will turn up in a studio storage space like Dorothy's old ruby slippers did. Before DC and Warner Brothers decided to reboot the Superman franchise yet again in 2013 with Zack Snyder at the helm, Bryan Singer's 2006 entry starring Brandon Routh as a Man of Steel flew into theaters with fairly mixed reviews. Superman Returns also nearly arrived with a completely different opening sequence. While the basic plot of the film deals with Superman's return to Earth after a 5-year absence, Singer shot a wordless, visually stunning 5-minute opening sequence with Routh's Superman visiting what was left of his home planet, Krypton. The scene, which cost an estimated $10 million, is slow and contemplative rather than bombastic and exciting. Maybe that's why producers ultimately had Singer cut it. The scene was finally released as an extra on the 2011 Superman Anthology Blu-ray set, further dividing critics and fans on the one-off superhero flick. As most Back to the Future fans know, Eric Stoltz was originally cast as Marty McFly, the puffy vest-wearing teenager sent back to 1955 in a souped-up DeLorean. Director Robert Zemeckis initially wanted to hire Michael J. Fox, but his family-ties shooting schedule was too demanding at the time, and he hired Stoltz instead. 5 weeks into filming, Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg knew they needed to replace Stoltz because he just wasn't funny enough. Zemeckis and Spielberg quickly negotiated with Universal to replace Stoltz with Fox, adding a reported $3 million to the film's budget and extra time onto its shooting schedule. Soon, Fox was on set at the Twin Pines Mall shooting with Christopher Lloyd. And the rest, of course, is history.
Great Scott!
Dreamy, dim-witted Secretary Kevin isn't much help around the Ghostbusters office. He's more concerned with picking out his best audition headshots and flirting with the ladies and answering the phone.
You know, an aquarium is a submarine for fish.
But when he's possessed by Rowan during the film's climax, he uses his new powers to make hordes of army personnel and police officers do whatever he wants. If you think it feels like the perfect segue into a dance number, you'd be right. Director Paul Feig spent 2 days and somewhere in the vicinity of 7 figures shooting an entire dance number, with Hemsworth and extras to the Bee Gees You Should Be Dancing. But it was ultimately cut. Feig told Vulture, "It was stopping the flow for the audience, because even though they really loved it, they were having trouble coming back out of it. It was making the rhythm a little too goofy in a weird way." Rather than completely scrap the footage, Feig re-edited it and used it during the film's credits, so audiences would still get to see Hemsworth busting a move. The sequence was also restored for the extended cut on Blu-ray. At the end of Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, the US dispatches a group of B-52s to drop H-bombs on the Soviet Union, but winds up abandoning the plan at the last minute. Unfortunately, one plane manages to drop its bombs, which triggers a nuclear chain reaction to the elegant strains of We'll Meet Again. However, director Stanley Kubrick envisioned a much different and messier ending to his 1964 satirical masterpiece. In an effort to show the complete absurdity of war, Kubrick filmed a giant pie fight between his principal cast and the war room in just one take, due to the mess and the expensive shooting. The scene kicks off with a pie hitting the president in the face, which, according to BFI, leads to the line, "Our beloved president has been infamously struck down by a pie in the prime of his life." However, the film's test screening happened on the day of John F. Kennedy's assassination, and suddenly the whole sequence felt problematic. Kubrick and the studio agreed that the pie fight didn't match the rest of the film's tone, and cut the scene for creative and political reasons.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Though it's unknown if the actual footage still exists, still photos of the scene are included in the DVD extras. The 1940s set mob movie Gangster Squad starring Sean Penn, Ryan Gosling, Josh Brolin, and Emma Stone once featured a key scene set at Grauman's in Los Angeles. The sequence saw a pack of gangsters open fire on the audience, causing the theater to erupt in mayhem. The film was set to be released in early September of 2012, but tragedy struck. That July in Aurora, Colorado, a gunman opened fire on a theater full of moviegoers at a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises. Warner Brothers, the studio behind both The Dark Knight Rises and Gangster Squad, immediately pulled the latter's trailer from theaters and pushed back its release date in order to allow for extensive rewrites and reshoots. Released in early 2013, Gangster Squad featured an all-new ending, and director Ruben Fleischer had no problem with it, telling IndieWire during a press conference, "We felt it necessary to reshoot that sequence, and I'm proud of the fact that we did. I think that we didn't compromise the film or our intent, and I think the newly shot Chinatown sequence is really well done, and that we should all respect the tragedy and not draw associations to our film." When reporters are interviewing the gang at the end of The Goonies, Data says something kind of surprising for them and the audience.
The octopus was very scary. Yeah, it was very dangerous.
It turns out the gang really did have a close encounter of the eight-armed kind. In the original version of the 1985 cult classic, the Goonies careen down watery chutes and land in a lagoon, only to be attacked by a rubbery giant octopus. Just when you thought that wasn't ridiculous enough, Data stuffs his Walkman cassette player into its mouth, while blasting a pop track written for the film entitled 8 Arms to Hold You, and the octopus swims away. A lot of work went into the scene, which was fully edited and scored for inclusion in the film. Most likely, the fabled scene was cut for time, or deemed unnecessary and cheesy looking. When the Disney Channel acquired the TV rights to the film in the 90s, the network added the scene back in to make up for lost airtime, after deleting scenes deemed inappropriate for young children. While the scene is only included in the DVD extras, Data's non sequitur revelation still remains in the final cut of the film. A curious group of movies were released in and around the 2000s that defy simple classification but all seem surprisingly similar. For lack of a succinct nickname, we'll call them modern fantasy horror adventures in blended medieval Victorian steampunk settings. That sounds convoluted, but it's explained best by its constituent movies, such as Red Riding Hood, Van Helsing, and Hansel and Gretel: Witch Hunters. All of them devoted considerable time and money to combining digital and practical effects, which made them all extra expensive. One film in this odd subgenre, 2005's The Brothers Grimm, wasted a lot of that expense on a single battle, which was cut from the movie entirely. The scene, which survives as a DVD extra, shows brothers Will and Jake Grimm trying to save Angelica from a massive tree that's magically come to life. It's apparent that many of the roots and branches were built as models, while the writhing branches were all digital, and the combination all but guarantees the scene a hefty price tag. Director Terry Gilliam confirmed as much to The Guardian, saying, "I cut out the most expensive scene in the movie. It'll be on the DVD, the most expensive extra ever made. It's a great sequence, a fight in a tree." If you've seen The Amazing Spider-Man and its sequel, you know they revolve around Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, played by Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. The two films are notable for their decision to focus on the relationship between Parker and Stacy, replacing the Parker and Mary Jane relationship that was central in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. What you may not know is that MJ was originally in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, appeared in multiple scenes, and was even played by well-known actress Shailene Woodley. Unfortunately for both Woodley and Mary Jane fans, her entire presence was cut from the film before release. Producer Matt Tolmach explained the decision to cut Woodley to the Los Angeles Times, saying, "It felt like a distraction. You can't have Peter thinking about Gwen every moment, and then there's this girl next door who's suddenly there. We weren't ready for it." While the cost of cutting her from this film is unclear, Woodley's pay for other projects in the 2010s tended to hover for around the $200,000 to $250,000 mark per movie, making it likely her deleted scenes cost quite a bit. And when you factor in Garfield's time, given his $500,000 payday for the first movie, it's likely that a lot of money was left on the cutting room floor. If you haven't seen The Raid or its sequel, The Raid 2, you're not alone. Despite both pictures receiving excellent reviews from critics and fans alike, neither became a commercial hit in the United States. As productions of the Indonesian film industry, the two movies have had a steadily increasing following on streaming services and DVD, but both remain relatively hidden cinematic gems. Nonetheless, the movies retain their small but dedicated following, thanks in large part to their consistently over-the-top action and violence, both of which are on display in a large-scale deleted scene known as Gang War. The scene is available online, though a warning for those who haven't seen the films, it's exceptionally violent. Gang War was personally posted by the film's director, Gareth Evans, as part of the marketing for The Raid 2. And under the post, Evans gave his own colorful approximation of the sequence's cast. He wrote, "This was probably the hardest for me to cut, due to the fact that the production on this scene lasted around 6 days of shooting, and it cost us a load to make." As hard as it is to pin an exact amount to Gang War, Evans' description gives us a pretty good idea that it certainly wasn't cheap. Movies cost an arm and a leg to make. That's why production companies sometimes go looking for funds in the weirdest of places, which is where product placement comes in. Sometimes producers are desperate enough for that sweet, sweet product placement money that their film ends up becoming essentially one giant ad. Happily, Die Hard 2 avoided that fate. Tragically, it only did so because it ended up deleting its product placement, prompting a very costly lawsuit. In exchange for $20,000 from Black & Decker, Die Hard 2 producers agreed to feature a scene in which hero John McClane used one of the company's signature Univolt power drills. Understandably expecting the scene to make it to theaters, Black & Decker began marketing the drill with Die Hard tie-in ads. Not a cheap affair. When the scene was cut from the movie, Black & Decker sued distributor 20th Century Fox for $150,000, hoping to recoup its advertising costs. The thing is, Black & Decker's case was strong enough that 20th Century Fox agreed to settle out of court, likely causing them to rue the day they ever dared to cut a convenient, durable product like the Univolt. When Disney began developing Star Wars: The Force Awakens, they knew that they had to get it right, which is why they threw tons of cash at it. According to filings obtained by Forbes, The Force Awakens was made with the largest budget of all time at over $533 million. With a budget like that, every single minute of deleted film was, by extension, ridiculously expensive. You might not know about its deleted scenes, as the Star Wars franchise doesn't tend to publicize its cut content in the way that other franchises do, but they are plentiful. Big-budget actors like Harrison Ford and Adam Driver have minutes of their work cut. Entire practical effects sets complete with costumes and props are cut, and even scenes with finished digital effects are cut, like those featuring CG alien Mars Kanata.
Oh my, this is a catastrophe.
There are few movies as titanic as Avengers Endgame. Upon release, it snapped several box office records to dust. Highest grossing opening weekend, fastest film to reach $1 billion, numerous single-day records, and even for a while, highest grossing film of all time. Still, as the old saying goes, it takes money to make money. And Avengers Endgame is no exception. Costing an estimated $400 million, a big chunk of that paid for its unprecedentedly star-studded cast.
Is that everyone?
But you wanted more?
And unfortunately for fans, many of that cast group scenes ended up on the cutting room floor. As the film's screenwriters told the New York Times, the climactic battle sequence was originally a whole lot longer with, quote, its own 3-act structure. One of the cut moments was a scene with a whopping 18 characters on set together in a trench. In fact, well over 10 minutes of filmed footage was cut, much of which featured the franchise's signature cast members. With the knowledge that Robert Downey Jr. earned $20 million up front for his role, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, and Scarlett Johansson made $15 million each, and dozens of other big stars were getting millions for their time, we can safely conclude that every minute of the Avengers Endgame deleted scenes came with a hefty price tag.
Vanilla Sky sets the tone of surreal, reality-questioning confusion from the opening scene. The perfectly groomed, gray-hair-plucking Playboy millionaire David Ames wakes as Radiohead's Everything in Its Right Place aptly lyricizes his life. Immaculate, flawless, perfected. Yet as David drives his vintage Ferrari through the streets of New York, the first cracks in this illusion appear. He drives to Times Square, the crossroads of the world, with approximately 330,000 daily passers-by. It's completely empty. Not even the faintest hint of the usual hustle and bustle. David wakes abruptly. It was all a dream, a false awakening interpreted by his therapist as a metaphor.
Well, I suppose the empty street meant loneliness.
You're a shrink. You gotta do better than that.
At only 30 seconds of screen time, the scene provides a fundamental function in the narrative, questioning the nature of reality and our relationship to dreams. Surprisingly, no CGI was used. Instead, director Cameron Crowe struck a deal with the NYPD to close off the area between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. on a Sunday in November 2000. The result was a spectacular sequence with a spectacular price tag, over $1 million for 30 seconds of footage. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Combining Cruise's enigmatic star power with the desolate backdrop helps create a poignant scene lacking in the 1997 Spanish-language original Open Your Eyes. In I Am Legend, Will Smith roams the post-apocalyptic streets of New York City as Dr. Robert Neville, a virologist attempting to find a cure for the zombie-producing Crippen virus. To create the feeling of desperate isolation, the film, like Vanilla Sky, has empty streets to match Warner Brothers' empty wallets. However, a substantial chunk of its $150 million budget was allocated to a much more populated scene, capturing Neville's tragic separation from his wife and child. In flashbacks, the audience sees that New York City was evacuated and placed under quarantine during the outbreak. In a race against time, Neville's family boards a helicopter to escape. Then comes a breathtaking moment of tragedy. The military bombs the Brooklyn Bridge. Amidst the chaos, the blazing bridge collapses into the water below, and Neville's family tragically dies in the ensuing accident. A fair share of digital magic was used to capture the missile's impact. Still, the surrounding evacuation was shot on location across 6 nights, requiring the cooperation of 1,000 extras, 14 different government agencies, an expansive lighting rig, and a crew of 250. Increased bureaucracy post 9/11 made acquiring the green light on the project a task that cost a cool $5 million. Think of James Bond, and what's the first thing that comes to mind? Aside from a cat-stroking evil genius, cool gadgets, and Bond girls, the answer is probably luxurious cars. After all, what would 007 be without an Aston Martin DB5 for company, a car featured in 7 different installments? Snazzy automobiles are largely part of the series' mythology, and Spectre continued that tradition by placing Daniel Craig in the front seat of the stylish Aston Martin DB10, a car produced exclusively for the 2015 film. Illustrative of the multi-millions Hollywood has to play with, $32 million of Spectre's rumored $300 million to $350 million budget was spent destroying cars.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
The biggest expenditure came from totaling 7 of the 10 aforementioned DB10s, a fact that will no doubt cause car enthusiasts to shed a tear. Chief Stunt Coordinator Gary Powell told the Daily Mail, "In Rome, we wrecked millions of pounds worth. The DB-10 sped through the narrow streets of the Vatican at top speeds of 110 miles per hour in a cat-and-mouse chase with a henchman in a Jaguar CX-75. A set amount for this singular scene hasn't been confirmed, but the number of destroyed DB-10s were, quote, shot one entire night for 4 seconds of film, making its cost per footage ratio astronomically high. 4 years after Neo swallowed the red pill and unveiled the true nature of reality in The Matrix, the philosophical cyberpunk sensation returned in 2003 with the second installment in the trilogy. This time, the Wachowskis had over double the budget, which, it's safe to say, they spent wisely. Ignoring the adage "don't play with traffic," the duo rejected digital effects and instead constructed a fake freeway at a decommissioned naval base in Alameda, California.
You always told me to stay off the freeway.
Yes, that's true.
Stretching a mile and a half, the set was the backdrop for Reloaded's white-knuckle chase between Morpheus, Trinity, the twins, and a host of agents. Surprisingly, the Wachowskis also opted for real-life stunts. Trinity actress Carrie Ann Moss, who overcame a, quote, major fear of motorcycles shooting the scene, told IGN they needed to have the best stunt people in the world. It was dangerous. You could really feel that every day you went out there. The final result is 20 minutes of mind-blowing, physics-defying carnage, and one of the most memorable car chases in cinematic history. As for the total cost, that had the blue pill treatment, never to be revealed publicly. However, the freeway alone cost $2.5 million. Throw in over 100 destroyed cars, practical effects, and CGI, and a significant percentage of the $150 million budget was likely spent on this single sequence. The Second World War was one of the deadliest conflicts in history, with casualties estimated to be over 56 million. One of the most bone-chilling, unfathomably brutal battles, the D-Day landing, was also the largest seaborne invasion in history. Those who weren't there will never truly know what it was like, but Steven Spielberg's acclaimed portrayal in 1998's Saving Private Ryan offers some insight. Most notable is its depiction of the Allies' arrival on Omaha Beach, a tense sequence Empire magazine ranked as the, quote, greatest battle in cinema. An unforgettable opening 25 minutes depict Tom Hanks' Captain Miller facing impossible odds, marching through blood-soaked sand, outmaneuvering explosions and dodging bullets, leading the way for the Allies' eventual victory at the German-occupied shore. It's filmmaking at its finest. Realistic, immersive, heartbreaking. And it earned Spielberg the Oscar for Best Director. Shot over the course of 4 weeks, a cast of 750 captured the horror of that fateful day on June 6, 1944. Unable to shoot at Omaha Beach, Spielberg shot on location on the east coast of Ireland, at Curracloe Strand. With minimal direction in the original script, most shots were, quote, spur of the moment and unplanned ahead of time. Spielberg told DGA Quarterly of the approach, "It helped make things a little more chaotic and unpredictable. Considering the magnitude of the scene and its lasting cultural impact, its $12 million budget might have been a good deal." Michael Bay is renowned for larger-than-life spectacles brimming with huge explosions and bomb-tastic set pieces, epitomized by his live-action Transformers franchise. Clearly, there's a thirst for big robots that turn into things, with the series earning a total worldwide box office of $4.48 billion.
Autobots, roll out!
The Last Night was the most poorly reviewed in the series, receiving a measly 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, but that wasn't due to a lack of investment. Its budget was a whopping $217 million, with a large chunk of that spent on location for one particular scene. As previous Transformers installment Age of Extinction concluded in a junkyard, producers were keen to maintain continuity. Phoenix Film Commissioner Phil Bradstock wryly remarked to Phoenix Business Journal, "The movie's art director was probably just doing a Google image search for a junkyard, and they came across this junkyard just north of Deer Valley Airport." Arizona's authorities won't be complaining about the fortuitous Google image search, though. It led to a hefty investment in the area. In a rare, detailed insight, Bradstock revealed that over the 10-day shoot, producers hired 40 locals to work behind the scenes, as well as 50 local vendors and 3,000 cumulative hotel nights. 2 months on location equated to an investment of $15 million, before factoring in CGI and other cost-increasing factors. Marlon Brando was widely regarded as one of the finest actors of his generation, if not any generation, when he won his second Academy Award for his captivating portrayal of Don Corleone in 1972's The Godfather. That film was also a blockbuster, and if the producers of the first big-budget Superman movie wanted to secure the great Brando to play Superman's father, Jor-El, they were certainly going to have to dig deep and pay up.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Brando ultimately appears in 1978's Superman the Movie for about 10 minutes out of the film's 143-minute running time. And yet he received top billing. over both Academy Award winner Gene Hackman, who played Lex Luthor, and relative newcomer Christopher Reeve, who actually portrayed the lead character. In addition to an appearance fee of $3.7 million, Brando was also contractually obligated to take home 12% of the film's profits. The former Godfather's take was $19 million. In 2020 dollars, that's about $75 million. And this doesn't even count the expensive-looking Krypton sets that filmmakers had to build for Brando's brief scenes. It's almost impossible to imagine the magnitude of the production behind Ben-Hur. The 1959 adaptation of Lew Wallace's novel and remake of the 1925 silent film of the same name is memorable for its extravagance. A stunning 9-minute chariot race is the crux of Wallace's story, and William Wyler's feature gravitates around the same centerpiece. Enduring acclaim is a deserving accomplishment. Following 5 years of preparation, the production was tireless and demanding, including 300 sets covering 140 acres, 9 sound stages, and thousands of extras. Set at Cinecittà Studios in Italy, it was the largest film set of its era. The arena alone, set in the fictional ancient city Antioch, was built by a construction team of 750 workers, created to capture the race between Judah Ben-Hur and Messala. Shot over 10 weeks, the singular scene cost $4 million. In today's money, that's over $34 million, or around $3.7 million for each minute of footage. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer wanted the experience to lure audiences into theaters, though, and it worked. To this day, Ben-Hur is one of the highest-grossing films ever, proving sometimes that hefty investments pay off. In 2001, director Michael Bay, at the time best known for Armageddon, took his penchant for big explosions and dazzling effects shots and applied them to a story set against the backdrop of actual historical events. The result? Pearl Harbor, an epic action movie that takes place primarily during events leading up to the 1941 Japanese military bombing of the US base in Hawaii. Bay went all out to realistically and graphically depict the bombing of Pearl Harbor, one of the most famous and destructive acts in American history. And this is no computer-generated mayhem and bloodshed. Bay used practical effects, and a lot of them. The crew employed the use of 700 sticks of dynamite and 4,000 gallons of gasoline to properly blow up 6 inactive ships from the Navy. It took around a month to set everything up, and the director certainly didn't want to miss anything, so he set up 12 cameras to film it all. In all, this one scene in Pearl Harbor cost approximately $5.5 million.
When Jennifer Jason Leigh watched in horror as Kurt Russell smashes a replica of an authentic 1870s Martin guitar in The Hateful Eight, her reaction was entirely real, because Russell unknowingly destroyed the actual Martin and not the replica.
Over. Whoa! Whoa!
Someone forgot to swap the real guitar for the prop. Leigh told Billboard, Kurt felt terrible. He had no idea. When he found out, his eyes literally welled up. Leigh was heartbroken. She'd just learned to play guitar on that Martin, and she'd even been allowed to take it home to practice. Before she learned it was a museum piece, Leigh had even inquired about the price. She was interested in taking it home once production was done. Martin Guitar Museum director Dick Boak told Reverb that the museum, quote, will no longer loan guitars to movies under any circumstances. Skyfall, the third James Bond movie to be filmed in Istanbul, might be the last filmed there after a stuntman crashed a motorcycle into a 330-year-old jewelry shop. The opening chase sees Bond pursuing the villainous Patrice across the rooftops of Istanbul. It culminates in a dramatic crash through a breakable prop window into the tight, vibrant corridors of the Grand Bazaar. What you don't see is the immediate aftermath. Swerving to avoid packed throngs of extras, the stuntman lost control of his bike and smashed right through the real crystal glass window of a historic jewelry shop. It's incredible how much preparation went into this scene and how things went awry anyway. Production manager Menderes Demir described the process to the Guide Istanbul. Before shooting, we had to negotiate and convince 1,650 shop owners in the area of the Grand Bazaar, the Spice Bazaar, and in between. The crew also had to secure countless permits from Turkey's Ministry of Culture, Transportation Commission, and Istanbul's police department. Finally, the stunt was rehearsed several times to ensure it would go off without a hitch. Meet Boybe, the shop's owner, said repairs were costly, complicated, and resulted in lost revenue. He explained to Reuters, "This place is regulated by the Council of Monuments. We can't even change our window without their permission." He also revealed the response from Skyfall's production. No one from the movie crew came to ask, "What are your losses?" We filed a complaint at the police station. In a thrilling scene in Christopher Nolan's legendary 2008 movie The Dark Knight, the Joker and his gang divert and trap a SWAT escort in a tight underpass. They manage to destroy several vans and even a police helicopter. Batman enters the fray in his Batmobile, having just taken out a few parked cars himself. It's a chaotic, exciting sequence, captured with close kinetic camera movements. Unfortunately, according to Shortlist, those camera movements also resulted in the destruction of an IMAX camera. Breaking a camera during production happens. IMAX cameras are in another league though. The manufacturer typically just rents out their cameras. They're so expensive, most movie productions wouldn't be able to afford them otherwise. How expensive are they? A single IMAX camera costs $500,000 according to Premium Beat. That's right, $500,000 for one camera. $500,000 is nothing to sneeze at, but given how profitable the movie was, that's a cost easily written off. But there was another wrinkle. In 2008, IMAX cameras were very rare. We're talking count on one hand and have a finger left over rare. Yep, Nolan broke just one of 4 IMAX cameras in the world at the time. Christopher Nolan doesn't have just one destroyed IMAX camera to his name. During production on 2012's The Dark Knight Rises, another IMAX camera was destroyed. The movie centers around a conflict between Batman and Bane, a criminal mastermind who imposes martial law on Gotham City. This culminates in a massive fight on the steps of Gotham City Hall. Catwoman rides the Batpod motorcycle out of the building, down the steps, and directly into an IMAX camera. The motorcycle isn't moving particularly fast, but the stunt woman and the cameraman didn't realize they were on a collision course, and the IMAX camera was knocked right out of his hands. Another $500,000 down the drain. At least this time, the number of IMAX cameras in the world had finally climbed to double digits. Andrei Tarkovsky's 1986 film The Sacrifice takes the cake for accidental destruction. That film burned down a whole house. Twice. To be fair, burning down the house was intentional. Less intentional was the camera jamming. The crew was filming from a distance as flames ripped viciously through the house. People hustled about shouting orders before it became abundantly clear what happened. Tarkovsky was filmed covering his face with both hands and moaning. As the house burned uselessly, Tarkovsky said, "The last thing I expected was for the camera crew to screw up." The house was rebuilt, albeit at great expense, and the scene refilmed. The movie went on to be a classic, but it's unlikely anyone forgot the moment the awful truth of the first house's destruction was revealed. Joaquin Phoenix has never been afraid to go well beyond what's written in the script. Sometimes that results in an injury to himself, as in Joker, where the actor so embodied his role he dislocated his knee while filming a scene, as reported by comicbook.com. In The Master, Phoenix's character, Freddie Quell, is thrown into a jail cell adjacent to Philip Seymour Hoffman's Lancaster Dock, sending Quell into a rage. Hands cuffed behind his back, Phoenix thrashes wildly in his cell. He violently throws himself repeatedly into the top bunk bed, kicks at the door, and finally stomps the toilet. The first stomp dislodges it, but the second sends it into the ground where it shatters instantly. Director Paul Thomas Anderson told IndieWire, "That unfortunately was a real porcelain toilet, a historic toilet. We could only do it once." Phoenix told the New York Times he drew inspiration from wild animals in captivity that react so viscerally that they often end up hurting themselves. He said, "I didn't intend to break the thing. I didn't know that was possible." In an episode from the 3rd season of Battlestar Galactica, Edward James Olmos broke a model ship in an emotionally charged fit of improvisation. Unfortunately, they forgot to tell Olmos that the model ship wasn't a prop, but instead was an original borrowed from a museum. Olmos told the crowd at the 2012 Planet Comic-Con, "I said, what did you put it in the scene for? I mean, God almighty, I've just been told that my daughter's dead. What are you, nuts?" That original he reduced to kindling? It was reportedly worth a cool $200,000.
At $217 million, The Pacific was the most expensive miniseries ever made when it was released in 2010.
Its depiction of the Peleliu beach landings in World War II alone cost $5 million, a figure that becomes even more staggering when you read The Hollywood Reporter's invoice breakdown. Some 300 actors worked on the 4-day shoot. The lead's daily rate was $700, stunt extras $150, and regular extras $70. This was economical according to the producers, who avoided big stars to offset the show's real money burners, which included uniforms, visual effects, and a whole arsenal of guns, explosives, and tanks. Then there was the CGI. Even simple effects such as adding a muzzle flash to a gunshot cost about $700. More complicated adjustments such as removing or masking features in the image ran about $40,000 per shot. 3.5 seconds of a landing craft, for example, cost almost $30,000. And these are just the post-production expenses. Each standard take during principal photography cost $13,500. The wide shots, of which there were 4 per day, could add up to $70,000. Spectacle costs money. That's why the pilot episode for Lost, which famously depicts a plane crash, cost ABC between $10 million and $14 million, the most expensive pilot in history at the time. The scene was constructed in multiple locations. It began aboard a mocked-up plane interior in a California soundstage, where director J.J. Abrams used a skillful blend of practical ingenuity and CGI to capture the horrifying panic as the aircraft drops out of the sky. The CGI takes over as we see the plane break apart and scatter across the ocean. Some additional disturbing moments were filmed on the coast of Oahu, Hawaii. It was here that the most expensive prop was used, a decommissioned airliner. The passenger plane was bought in the Mojave Desert and then transported to Hawaii, where it was staged in catastrophic fashion. Fortunately, ABC's investment would reap major dividends. Lost became one of the biggest shows of the 2000s, and occasionally one of its most confusing.
Alright, dude, we're from the future.
Game of Thrones is a big show, a very big show. Everything about it is massive, including the budget. Metro reports that the notorious 8th season cost $90 million, which means $15 million for each of the season's 6 episodes. Of these, it's likely that the Battle of Winterfell cost the most. All of the pricey ingredients are here: a sweeping cast with established fame and hefty salaries, scores of extras decked in unique costumes, towering set design, and seamless integration of CGI. However, this huge battle split opinion among viewers. Many bemoaned how dimly lit the cinematography was, complaining that they had to adjust the brightness on their TVs because it was simply too dark to watch.
I can't see. Well, that's your problem, not mine.
Other viewers loved it, with a headline at Games Radar quoting a claim that it was the most intense episode in television history. The $18 million pilot of Boardwalk Empire is effectively one big piece of world building that displays the show's glitz and glamour, including the lavish boardwalk set that cost $5 million.
That's a lot.
It's quite a lot.
The boardwalk set was staged in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and took months to build. In an interview with the Chicago Tribune, set designer Bob Shaw said that it was the biggest outdoor set built in New York City in almost 100 years. Then there were the small details. The storefronts were based closely on the Atlantic City Boardwalk circa 1920. That's just one part of the exhaustive research that went into the project, which covered everything from key moments of World War I and Prohibition to the wider popular culture of the era. Budgets tend to bulge when warfare and especially fire-breathing dragons are involved. The Crown has neither of those things, but 70 years of royal history doesn't come cheap. In fact, The Crown is one of the most expensive shows ever made, with the first season costing $130 million. The priciest scene in the 10-episode run is Queen Elizabeth II's wedding. It features a replica dress that, according to Harper's Bazaar, cost $37,000 to make. This standout piece of wardrobe was just one part of the show's ornate grandeur. In a conversation on the red carpet, actor Claire Foy said, "Every single penny was spent on screen. All the locations are appropriate but extraordinary. The costumes were handmade and designed. Also, we were shooting in London. It's so rare that you're able to shoot in London. We shut down the mall for an entire morning." Matt Smith, who played Prince Philip, added, "We had great costumes, great locations, so I think all the money went on screen." Sense8 was always going to be an expensive show because its 8 main characters are from every corner of the earth. According to Wired, this globe-trotting extravaganza was costing Netflix $9 million per episode when it was cancelled in June 2017. Of the show's 24 episodes, Season 2's Christmas special was likely the most expensive, in particular an underwater scene that took the cast and crew all the way to Malta. Filming underwater is far more complex than filming on dry land, and it often requires up to 3 times as many crew members. Then there are creative concerns, namely the complications affecting light and color, which means waiting for the opportune time period on the open sea or using elaborate lighting equipment if working in a tank.
Either way, it's a matter of crew, time, and technology, all of which costs plenty of money. Jack Ryan is one of Amazon's proudest exhibits. It announced the company's intention to spend big money on big drama, $8 million per episode to be exact. Every action scene is an explosive testament to Amazon's deep pockets. Pinpointing a certain scene isn't easy because there are so many to choose from, but the subway shootout in Season 1, Episode 8 is definitely a highlight. As with so much of contemporary TV, the lines between reality and CG are blurred, as Jack Ryan edges down the subway tunnel gun in hand. After a brief shootout, a train barrels along the tracks, obliterating one of the men Ryan's just shot. And it's exactly that type of CGI-driven moment that can take a big bite out of an episode's budget.
And it was totally worth it.
Most fans like to see their protagonists kick ass, especially when they're dealing with zombies. Depicting this is usually a rather modest affair, at least in the scheme of mega-budget TV. But which Walking Dead scene took the biggest chunk out of the show's budget? Well, Season 7's 9th episode saw prices go up when it featured 2 old cars, a line of wire, and a whole lot of walkers. The bulk of the cost was likely incurred during post-production. Processing all of those CGI flying limbs does not come cheap. Even the walkers' moans and groans were added by audio specialists. The undead extras are asked to remain silent. As usual, this scene was an amplification of a budget that was already full of expensive details. For example, Yahoo reports that AMC paid the families of Sonoya, Georgia, where the majority of the series is filmed, $400 a month to compensate for the hassle of production and to discourage locals from sharing any spoilers they might have seen. When Friends started in 1994, the budget was so tight that producers had to use the bottled episode format, which required the crew to use as few sets as possible and not even think of having special guests. Well, as everyone on the face of the earth knows, Friends would become one of the biggest shows in the history of American television, earning Warner Brothers a yearly syndication revenue of $1 billion. This success saw the modestly staged show end up costing a pretty penny for NBC. By the 8th season, each main cast member was earning $750,000 for every 30-minute episode. That's $25,000 a minute. So when Brad Pitt turned up for Thanksgiving dinner, it couldn't have been cheap. Still, it's a no-brainer when the choice is between money and an unforgettable episode.
What's more important, your friends or money?
Friends!
Just like with Lost back in 2004, showrunner J.J. Abrams wanted Fringe to make a strong first impression. Unfortunately for Fox executives, a sequence that included scores of extras, face-melting special effects, and a custom-built set would contribute to a $10 million budget. The cost breakdown would have shared much in common with Lost, a mocked-up plane interior, a soundstage, and detailed CGI. Only this time there was a strong serving of gory makeup applied to about a dozen extras aboard the doomed plane. Fringe, like other entries on this list, would see the budget fall after its pilot, plateauing at a rate of $4 million per episode. Yet another case of pilot extravagance. The costumes, period sets, and star power of vinyl is said to have cost $30 million. However, despite the collaboration of Mick Jagger and Martin Scorsese, vinyl landed with neither critics nor audiences. So why did it cost so much money? Well, much like 70s rock, too much is never enough.
That's what I'm talking about.
The pilot episode was effectively one big scene crammed with everything viewers could expect from the rest of the season. In the case of vinyl, this manifested in a large ensemble cast, a sweeping wardrobe of authentic 70s garb, and a catalog of licensed music. The pilot's $30 million price tag was just 33% of the first season's $100 million budget, which would ultimately sink the show before it could take off. The Big Bang Theory had become a massive show by its 11th season. Its 250-plus episodes brimmed with the affectionate geekiness that fans around the world identified with. So for the season's final episode, which featured the marriage of Amy and Sheldon, the show needed an extra special guest. That guest, of course, was Mark Hamill, the iconic Star Wars actor.
That's Mark Hamill!
Hamill was the perfect choice to officiate the wedding of two super geeks, and he also brought some extra star power to the show. Although this wedding episode already boasted a bevy of high-profile cameos, including Kathy Bates, Jerry O'Connell, Laurie Metcalf, Will Wheaton, plus many more. And that's basically how a simple sitcom can cost $9 million for a single episode. Rome is another lavish production that was overwhelmed by its budget. In many ways, Rome set the stage for Game of Thrones, which would reach a far bigger audience using a similar brew of power, politics, and violence. The budgetary peak for Rome came with the depiction of the Battle of Philippi, which occurred in 42 BC during the Liberator's Civil War. It's a huge scene that mixes dozens of extras clad in full suits of armor and carrying a variety of weapons. Also, everything we see is supplemented by CGI that multiplies the scene's scope many times over. TV had never been staged like this before, a towering blend of sword and sandal grandeur mixed with modern grit and violence. Game of Thrones is a show that's too big to mention just once. Of all the chaos and majesty that we witness, the dragon attack in Season 7's 4th episode is perhaps the most awesome and the most expensive. The execution of this remarkable sequence was detailed in a short HBO documentary. When director of photography Rob Malachlan learned about the scene, he had an understandable response.
Oh boy, that is going to be a lot of work.
McLachlan's team operated at least 4 cameras, sometimes 7 or 8. They also used 3 different tracking vehicles to capture the huge Dothraki charges, which were also filmed on cameras hoisted on industrial cranes. Then there were the helicopter drones, which were supplied by a third party to add further dynamic shots to this complex sequence. The zenith of the episode occurs when the dragon focuses his deadly attack on the loot train, which we see from several perspectives. The practical effects team worked tirelessly to create a seamless line of explosions that would not only look authentic but also push an already epic depiction of a dragon in battle to the next level.